not too many coaches have never been a part of conflict amongst each other. At least I think so. I mean, like you said before, you don't want a yes man, and neither would I. And the coaches that came on previously, I know they wouldn't. And so, how do you personally handle conflicts? Whatever the situation is, how do you handle it as a program, RJ?
I think that that question has a huge wide gap in it. I think that by saying this is how I handle conflict, there's multi types of conflict as a head coach you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to deal with, parent conflicts. You're going to have to deal with player conflicts. You're going to have to deal with administration conflicts. You're going to have to deal with community conflicts. You have to deal with, your own staff conflicts. So I think that's a pretty general question, and the way I'll answer it is I think you got to be able to listen to everyone's side of it. But ultimately, I think if you have established a clear criteria, a clear objective of what you want to get accomplished, or what you were asking from that situation, or I don't think that you can go wrong in those cases. I think when you see coaches that have the hardest time, I feel like they're guys that want to make people happy, and not necessarily willing to ruffle feathers of people higher up. And by no means does anyone want to kick their boss off or make them disappointed in what's going on. But you also have to have that aspect to you that you're going to do what you feel is best because it's your job ultimately. And I've dealt with a ton of issues at Salem already. And we're in year 3, and I feel like we've accomplished a whole lot. We've dealt with drugs. Everybody as a head coach, you're going to deal with that stuff. And drugs and alcohol, you're going to deal with, playing time. You're going to deal with the conflict piece is a huge topic. But again, I think if you come back to these are the things that I set forth. This is what I'm passionate about. This is what I'm going to do because I know at the end of the day, when if or when I get fired, I did it the way that I felt was the best way for Salem football. And, taking that approach to it has been clear and to our parents. We meet with our parents in May before summer starts, freshman parents all the way through our seniors. They have to attend the meeting or their kids can't practice with us. And by doing that, what it allows us to do is lay out every ground rule, every criteria, everything that we want to be accomplished by the end of the summer. It's laid out there for them to know in May, and not waiting until August.
Mm-hmm. I should have done a better job. I'm sorry. Go ahead, RJ.
I just think that the conflict, I think it's how do you do? I think I could answer your question better if it were, a specific type.
Yes. Yeah. I was meaning for coaching conflicts as far as maybe assistants among assistants, or maybe you had a conflict with your assistant when you're the head coach.
Number one with that is you can't. I'm a firm believer that when your head coach is a guy that is berating and downgrading his staff in front of people, I feel like you're setting yourself up for kids to do the same thing. For kids to say, well, hell, if coach is giving him a hard time, right in front of all of us, then what does that say? Coach doesn't believe in him, or I don't think that. I think conflict within your staff has got to stay inside your staff office. I think when it starts to spill over out into public and out into where your kids, your players can see that, I think that's when you really create issues with amongst your team.
Yeah, and my notes here, the very first thing I have down for this question is, it's got to be in private 100% of the time, how you handle it and how you discuss it. And
now, don't get me
that goes
wrong,
back to the loyalty piece.
Yeah, you're not going to ever just totally, there's been days I've been out on the practice field and I didn't like the way that we were handling something, and, I sat in the same meeting that we all were in, and, and I just didn't like the way it looked, and I wanted to change it right there, and, I made that call, and, at the end of the day, I'm man enough to look at our team and say, you know what, I probably shouldn't have piped in when I did, because I didn't, probably should just sat back and looked a little longer and to make sure that I was making the right decision and before I stepped on someone else's toes. And, that's just I think that's part of trusting each other. And I think that, when you got guys you trust and guys that are loyal to you, I feel like you can probably handle yourself a little bit different than what you might if, it's a guy that you've never met and he's just coaching for you.
That situation you're talking about when you jumped in and kind of changed things because you didn't like it. First of all, yeah, you're entitled to that because that's you. That's your name on the program as a leader, and the fact
but I don't look at it that way. I look at it's his name on our defense, and
right.
And so when I look at it like that, I got to step back and know that I was wrong. I was in the wrong in that, because at the end of the day, if it's his name on our defense, then I got to let a guy do what he feels is best for our defense. And that's a hard thing to do, like I said at the beginning. I mean, to turn stuff over to your assistants, it's tough. I mean, it's tough to just say, hey, I don't want anything, I don't coach defense whatsoever. I only coached offense for 3 years. I haven't coached defense once. And that takes a lot of trust, and it's a lot of responsibility on other people. So I just think
what I was going to allude to, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say what I was alluding to with the fact of you, at the end of practice, whether it was in front of the team or whether it was just with the staff, owning up to, what your philosophy was and what you shouldn't have done. And that's a great thing. If you did it in front of the kids, that's a great thing. One, your coaches see, wow, he's owning up to this. I need to make sure that, I'm doing the same thing. And if the kids see it, that's even possibly a better situation, because they say, holy cow, because kids probably think you personally, or any head coach that is when you're a player, that coach never makes mistakes. And, that's obviously not true.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So by doing that, RJ, and I commend you for that tremendously, because, kids need to see that, and that goes back to those life lessons that you referred to earlier. But, no, I was just trying to allude to the fact your name is on the program, but also those other guys are accountable as well. But by you coming in as the leader of the program and accepting that mistake in front of them and saying, hey, my fault, my bad, that's a great thing for them to see. So situations like that, whether it's an assistant coach or players that see that, that's pretty crucial for their development as a person too.
I agree. I mean, I just think that if the situation happens in front of kids, and kids saw it, then I think that your apology, or I think you need to own it in front of kids. I think that if it happened in your closed doors, and there's lots of arguments that happen in a coach's office, but
right.
I think at the end, if you know and you truly trust and you believe that everybody on your staff has the same goal, and that's to win, then I don't know how you could hold a grudge when something bad happens. Sure,
definitely. And I just have a quick story about conflict amongst coaches. The staff that I wasn't on, I was a player for. There was a conflict out in the open, and it actually ended up with some punches being thrown back and forth. And as a player, for myself seeing that, I'm like, wow, is this how we are? Is this how players should be? And especially at a young age, kids see that and they think that's acceptable, that's okay. And I just want to point out to those young coaches out there, that is not acceptable, and that should never ever happen. You should always be able to discuss things in a manner of professionalism, and obviously the heat of the moment sometimes happens, but not to that extent, at least in my opinion.
Agree.
So I just want to touch on that a little bit. Going back to your assistants and responsibilities, RJ, what kind of responsibilities do you give your assistants besides the actual coaching part of the sport?
Well, I mean, the day one that I was hired, I came in and I had a list of things that, if I'm going to hire an offensive line coach, this is what I want him to do. And, when I interviewed him and when we sat down and, we were able to establish these are things I want to do, these are things I'm not comfortable doing, and I think that you got to play it to your strengths of the people on your staff. Like our wide receivers coach, one of my best friends he's a guy that's our technology guy at the school. So what sense would it make for me to have our offensive line coach, input film? I just think that I had this plan going in like it was going to be clear cut and it wasn't going to be something that we could deviate from. But at the end of the day, you got to play to strengths if you want to win. You're not going to ask a quarterback that can only throw to run. You're not going to ask one that can run to throw. And so I just think that your philosophy as a coach has to be set to an extent, but I think also you've got to be able to be flexible and you've got to be able to move people into positions that that they can succeed in because, ultimately coaching, you get paid probably a nickel an hour, if that. And, there's nobody in the world that's going to work for a nickel an hour and want to be bad. All those people that you have, I feel like are people that, want to be good. And if they don't, you need to fire them. I mean, but as far as, what their responsibilities are, I just think that, like our defensive coordinator, his job is to have a game plan. Okay, so he has to set staff meetings with the defense. He has to set scouting reports. He has to have that ready to me on Sunday morning, and I print it and ready to go on Monday morning when the kids walk in. Our defensive line coach makes all of the blocking schemes that he's going to face that week, gives it to our defensive coordinator before he can give it to me. So I mean, there's a ton of different avenues that you can go down with given responsibility. I just feel like you have to, you're not going to ask a 75-year-old coach that's coached his whole life and he's a heck of a football coach to go in and input on huddle. That just wouldn't make any sense. When you got a 25-year-old kid that can do it and he's able to get on a computer and roll with it, I think you have to be flexible, but I think that you have to have clear-cut defensively. This is everything that I need to happen. In a perfect world, this is the way it would happen. In a situation where, it might not happen that way, but I think as the coach, you have to say, this is what's got to happen. And it doesn't really matter to me who does it and how it gets there, but it's got to get done.
Sure. Yes, definitely. And, some of the more specific things, and I just have some notes down here as far as possibilities for responsibilities for assistant coaches, and it goes back to philosophy and playing your strengths, like you said. Fundraising, obviously the head coach is a part of it, but you can also lean on some of those guys on your staff to kind of run it as a manager, I guess you should say, of a department. And so fundraising is an opportunity. Creating a press release for the local newspapers or the radio. You could have a youth / middle school liaison on your staff that communicates back and forth, and obviously the head coach is obviously a huge piece of this puzzle in every one of these things. But giving your assistants some of these responsibilities is pretty crucial as well. Film breakdown, that's obvious, something that every coach is a part of, and scouting reports and game planning, that's crucial as well. Parent interaction, I think that's kind of a thing that every coach should endure, and whether it's position players, parents, or that side of the ball, especially with football, they need to see you. And I truly believe that responsibilities with assistants, that should be on top of their list as far as interaction with parents, so they get that community, that family feel for your program. They may even have to do some public speaking, maybe in the banquet. Maybe
we do, and they do all that. I mean, they all have a role in everything we do. Again, I think you have to go back and look at it like are you the head coach of your position? The only difference in my job and an assistant's job is mainly the conflict resolution. I'm never